You learn to trust certain people the way you trust a streetlight, because it's always there. Mr. Harris was our streetlight. He showed up early, left late, kept his shirts pressed, and his temper softer than most adults we knew. He taught history like it was a living thing. He would make the past breathe, and then ask us to feel what it cost. Students loved him. Parents trusted him. I thought, if there were someone I would never have to worry about, it would be him. He was more than a teacher to me. He was a quiet text at 4 p.m. with advice about college essays. He was a hand on my shoulder when my voice cracked during presentations. When my grandmother got sick, he brought homemade soup and sat down like he had a right to the silence beside us. You keep people like that in one box in your head labeled safe. You stop wondering. It started with little inconsistencies, things I could hand to coincidence. A coffee cup left in his classroom with lipstick that didn't match his wife's, though no one ever asked about his home life. His watch would show different times when he came back from break, as if he had stepped through a handful of clocks and shuffled them. Once, I noticed a bruise high on his forearm that looked like an invisible hand had argued with him and won. He laughed when I asked and said, "I fell on my bicycle." The laugh was a sound I trusted, so I let it close the question. Then the late-night routine began. I was in the library past 9, finishing a paper, when the custodial door creaked and Mr. Harris slipped in. He didn't look like a man leaving his classroom to grade papers. He looked like a man who'd stepped out of a different day. He had a hoodie under his coat and a duffel bag that bulged like it had stories. He glanced at me, the kind of glance that archives you without permission, and then he left. I told myself I'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. You start noticing patterns when you look for them. He left school precisely at midnight 3 nights in a row. Once, I saw him get into a nondescript sedan, headlights off, follow a route that led away from main roads and into a stretch of warehouses that smelled like oil and old rain. Another time, he parked miles away, walked to a convenience store, used cash to buy a small prepaid phone, and walked back to the car like someone carrying contraband wrapped in habit. I told my friend Owen, half joking, "Maybe he's writing a spy novel." Owen said, and laughed, like it could be a joke. I wanted it to be. But the weight of the duffel and the way he scanned the street with an absentman's awareness kept colliding with simple explanations until neither of them fit. Curiosity is a flat stone. You throw it, and somewhere downstream, it skips into trouble. The first solid piece came by accident. I needed a letter from the school office and found Mr. Harris's desk unlocked. An error. The secretary apologized. I should have closed the drawer and walked away. Instead, I opened it. In the bottom, behind a stack of graded essays, was a folded receipt from a storage facility 3 towns over. It was underlined, dated 2 weeks ago. The handwriting on the receipt matched the slanted, careful script he used on the board when he wanted a rule to stick. Storage facility, 2 addresses, a locker number. A promise written as a number. The next day, I watched him with a different patience, the kind that's clinical, not curious. I learned the shape of his mornings: coffee at 7:15, staff meeting at 8 o'clock, an eye on attendance like he was counting missing pieces. Then, on Thursday, the car followed the route the receipt had suggested. I tailed him, careful to be invisible, careful to feel the quiet hum of doing something you know will change your life. The storage unit was in an ugly strip of buildings, industrial, neutral, built to forget. He used a key, not a code. The door hissed up like a throat clearing. He pushed inside and closed it. From the slot by my steering wheel I could see the light from the unit's gap. He moved inside with a rhythm I did not recognize from the classroom. There were colors and voices I'd never heard him adopt. I could have left. I did not. I waited until he came out, then slipped in while the air was warm with the sun, and the unit was empty, and the latch still open. There was no monster lair, no room full of stolen goods, nothing cinematic. But the inside of his life was worse in 100 quiet ways. Stacks of envelopes stamped with cash amounts, passports with faces that weren't his, a ring binder of plain paper filled with lists, names, bank account numbers, pickup times. One sheet made my mouth dry. It listed local businesses and instructors, times when shipments arrived, and then, lower, in a column, amounts next to initials. One initial matched my math teacher's name. Another matched a name I'd seen on flyers around town. This was not about me. It was about a pattern the town had gotten used to, a quiet market that ran beneath daylight. The binder had margins with phone numbers and P.O. boxes. Next to one number was a note: if questioned, say courier. No names. Beneath that, a hastily scrawled line: protect students, protect students. My head filled with the echo of his lessons: liberty, compromise, what the past asks of the living. I wanted to believe protect meant what I hoped. But the piles of cash and the anonymous passports did not pair neatly with protector. The worst evidence was human and small, a photo folded into an envelope. Inside, a picture of Mr. Harris smiling with other men in an empty factory. In his hand, he held a sealed envelope. In the background, a kid I recognized from the community center looked tired beyond his age. I took photos on my phone, hands shaking, My chest felt like a closet someone had locked. I closed the unit, slid the door down, and drove home with proof that didn't make sense and a fear that did. For 3 days I rehearsed what to do: call the police, tell a counselor, show the principal, tell my parents. Each option sheared at something. If the police were clean, they could blow it open. If they were not, they might be the ones who pocketed envelopes. If I told someone at school, rumors would spread, and someone could get hurt. If I told my parents, I would fracture the image of my childhood, the man who brought soup. I thought of students who looked to him like he was a ladder out of the ordinary. Exposing him could topple roofs. I chose to watch. I watched until a late autumn night when the line between watching and participating blurred. There was a meeting in a warehouse, the kind of place with high windows and low civility. Mr. Harris walked in with his duffel bag, confident and taxed in equal measure. He handed an envelope to a man with a scar along his jaw. The man opened it and counted. Then he slid a thin slip of paper across the table: an address, a name I had seen in the binder. Mr. Harris nodded. When the meeting dispersed, the scar man reached for the duffel and Mr. Harris put his hand over it, almost tender, like a parent smoothing a blanket. I moved closer to the crates in my shadow, and something shifted in my peripheral vision. A beam of light came across my face. I froze. The beam ordered me to step into the open. Mr. Harris lifted his head. For half a breath our eyes met. He didn't grab me. He only said, "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation with a kindness wrapped around it. That look, steady, not surprised, told me he had rehearsed losing moments and still considered me a safe thing to leave. "Why?" I said, though my lungs wanted a mute button. The question was foolish, raw. But I needed him to say something that fit. He swallowed. His voice came back like a book that had been closed for a long time, and then opened. "You wouldn't understand if I told you everything tonight," he said. "I am involved. I have been involved for a while. You are part of why I can't stop right now. Part of why," I demanded. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, not menacing, but intimate in the way people become when they share a danger. "There are people who keep our city running in the dark. They took advantage of people, vulnerable people. I'm trying to channel what they give me to the ones they hurt. I'm trying to pay debts I never could with lesson plans and salaries. We're talking about passports and cash and kids in pictures," I said. "That's illegal," he said. "Dangerous. I know. I didn't want to be the kind of person who talked in halves. But the law doesn't always give us a right answer on a right schedule. You want the simple villain? The man in the suit will be the headline, and he will be sentenced in sunlight. The problem will be the same. I am trying to be a bridge. Everything in me wanted to fling what I had taken into the nearest official's hands. The rational part of me said the truth would be a sluice of consequences with people drowning on the way out. The empathetic part stolen from my respect for a man who had taught me courage hunted for a reason to stay quiet. "If you're a bridge," I said, the words brittle. "Why does it require secrecy? Why the passports? Why the storage units?" "My methods are ugly," he said. "I make deals. I carry envelopes. Sometimes I take risks to buy time for people who otherwise don't have it. I don't pretend I'm noble. I pretend I have a plan. I don't want to be part of someone's plan if it means living in fear," I said. "I don't want my classmates to think their teacher is a monster." He finished for me. He shook his head. "I would rather be called a monster by history than have your friend live in a cage of other people's debts." He looked tired enough that pity felt like betrayal. He looked honest enough that denouncing him felt like betrayal too. The warehouse hummed with the sound of men returning to their lives. A crate thumped. Somewhere metal scraped. A decision is a small thing that becomes a chain. I left without telling anyone then. I took his words and folded them into a silence. I went home and lay awake reweighing ethics like coins. 2 weeks later, there was a raid, not by polite men in suits, but by the kind of squad that moves like winter, quick, efficient, and indifferent to explanation. The scar man, the suit, not Mr. Harris. They rounded the warehouse. They found ledgers, a few passports, and a man who screamed his innocence until his throat was raw. The news called it a small-time ring. The headline showed a blurry photo of a van. Mr. Harris walked into school the next Monday, as if nothing had happened. Coffee, dry erase, the casual cadence of a man who teaches children the meaning of revolutions. I watched his hands during roll call. They were less steady than before. 2 months later he was gone. No announcement, no final class. The principal said he'd accepted a position at a new school across the state. Parents murmured about opportunity and life choices. Underneath the polite rap, people made space for their own cancellations. "He must have needed a change," said one mother, and everyone nodded. I found an envelope tucked into my locker the day after he left. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a pen-scribbled line. "You saw me. You kept it. That is an ugly kind of mercy. Thank you." There was no signature. I don't have answers about everything, I don't know how many of the faces in the binder found safer ground. I don't know which lies he told that saved or damaged the same chance. I do know that people aren't always the sum of the parts you see in the light. I know that a teacher who shows you what the past costs is not always a saint, and sometimes not always a sinner. The thing that stopped me most nor was it the passports, or the envelopes, or the limping man in the footage. It was a smaller fact. A teacher taught me how to imagine courage, then asked me to choose whether that courage should be for the truth in the open, or the truth that moves in shadows. When I close my eyes, I still see that hallway, the light slanting across his shoulders. I still hear him asking, not as a teacher, but as a human being, "What do you want the world to know about me?" I don't have an answer that feels clean. If I say I exposed him, part of me would be telling the truth. If I say I protected him, that's true too. Sometimes I think the worst double life is not the one someone hides to hurt. It's the life someone hides to protect, because every protection paid in secret will demand a price in daylight. And the day I learned that, the man who wrote history on classroom boards became, painfully and finally, one of its reasons.